Okay, 3, 2, 1, we go.
Welcome to those of you who are joining us today, just to learn a little bit more about our CatchOn child exploitation education resource that we produce within Catch-22. I'll talk a little bit about what it is and why it was that we wanted to create it, but we're going to be presenting today for about half an hour, and then you will have half an hour where you will be able to ask questions or seek clarification if you want to. My name is Sarah Parker. I'm the Research and Development Officer with Catch-22, and I've been involved in the creation of the resources. On the call today, we also have 3 of my colleagues who are variously kind of education curriculum leads, a Catch-22 exploitation service coordinator, and a practitioner. So we've got the whole kind of range covered, hopefully. So let me tell you a little bit about CatchOn. But before we do that, I would like you just to have a think about the things that are concerns for you. So the slide I just very briefly showed you are the concerns that were shared by about 36 teachers of year 7 pupils about stuff that goes on with their children outside of school. So we were not looking at school, we were looking at the things that are part of their life outside of the school community. And we asked people just to share what their concerns were. Now I'll show you that word cloud again in a minute, but I wonder if in the chat you'd mind doing 2 things. One is feel free to say who you are and where you're from. But secondly, anything that you might be concerned about in terms of your pupils' lives outside of school. If you just joined us, I know it's difficult at the end of a working day, and people might be joining late because they were just desperate for the toilet or a cup of tea or whatever it might be. Just to say that we've asked people to share in the chat the kind of things that you might be concerned about in terms of some of your pupils that are happening outside of school, not things that are from within the school. Those are things that are more in your control, but the stuff that is going on for your children outside of school. And I'll just begin to read some of them as they come through. So somebody so far has said that they're worried about the children that they teach being involved in or the subject of criminal activity. So that's both being as a perpetrator potentially, or being a victim of criminal activity outside of school in the community. So we've got another one come through that is around screen time, just the fact that children seem to have endless amounts of screen time outside of school. And some of that, I think, is perhaps a bit of a hangover from the pandemic, isn't it? And then who is it they're interacting with when they're online? And how do we even know? How do we know who they're talking to? How do they know? Yes, somebody else put online harms. So there's that kind of is digging a bit deeper about what children might be doing when they're online. Children who suffer abuse at home, and particularly if we're looking at things like domestic abuse, we do know that that is something that sadly increased quite significantly during lockdown, and it is not clear that that has abated. We don't think that's the case. The data so far suggests that there are still elevated levels of domestic abuse, but there are of course other forms of abuse children might be suffering with. Fabulous, thank you. So what I think I'm going to do is move on, and then you can have a look at this word cloud that was created by, as I say, about, I think it was about 36 year 7 teachers of year 7 pupils. And here are some of the things that they shared. Now, of course, the things that you've just shared are also here. You can see how big social media is. The fact that social media is so big means that it's the one thing that occurred more times than anything else. So we had a lot of stuff about online stuff, online bullying, or actually in-person bullying, things about abuse, drugs, vaping, neglect, influences came across very strongly. The whole thing about social media influencers and the impact that might have, including some very famous people who have been in the news far too much recently. So these are the kind of things that our children are experiencing, and we know they are. And sometimes in school, we can feel quite powerless about that. And so what we wanted to do in Catch-22, having done a bit of field work out, speaking to teachers, and also looking at our own experience in our child exploitation services around the country. We run a number of contracts in a number of places around the country to support children who've been reported missing, children at risk of sexual exploitation, criminal exploitation, children who are being exploited in county lines. And we often receive those children at our door in a referral when actually harm has already been experienced by those children. Things have already gone wrong. And we felt increasingly that what we wanted to do was to try to create something that we could offer as a resource in the areas in which we work, and actually to anyone. Why would we limit it? So that those children could be aware of what was going on prior to perhaps coming into contact with people who might wish to abuse them, exploit them, groom them. And that was really where the child exploitation resource came from. So our objective in creating this resource was to look at years 7 to 8. And there's a very good reason for that. We know that transition from primary to secondary school can be a real kind of moment of sort of anxiety for children. It can also be the time when actually they feel much more insecure in their friendships, in their identity. Suddenly they're with much older young people. And we felt that it was really key to get in there. These are also the ages just before the average age of our service users. We do have sometimes young people who are referred in year 7 and 8, but the majority of them are years 9, 10, 11 and upwards. So we wanted to offer something where we could get in there early to raise awareness of exploitation amongst children and young people, to enable young people to recognize the signs of exploitation and also to know how to seek support. You know, it's not about expecting them to deal with it by themselves, but where do they go? Who can they talk to? Is that conversation even open? So this is a way of kind of enabling education professionals to open that conversation with children so they know it's okay to bring it into school if they need to. And we also wanted to support and educate professionals and everyone in the school community, including parents, to be able to support young people and signpost them. So we didn't just come up with that out of the blue. There is evidence around that it's increasingly sort of coming into the public domain about the importance of exploitation education. Often we haven't explicitly talked about this, but the value of explicit exploitation education is something that's increasingly emerging as a positive thing that we could do, and something that we ourselves are looking to do more research into. It's all about prevention and early identification, so that before the child has suffered considerable harm, we've been able to get in there and to try to reduce the risks. I'll be honest, it was also to reduce the demand on our own teams, because one of our services, for example, has had a 300% increase in referrals. Now, I mean, that's massive, and clearly we can't cope with that on the same resources that we had previously, but neither do we want to be ignoring the needs of children out there. And we know that we have a wonderful resource in schools. We know that staff are in really regular, meaningful contact with children day after day after day. Often school staff will be the people that children will come to speak to first. So we wanted to be able to support school staff to deliver these sessions and deal with some of these issues. So some of the people that you see on this call were involved in creating it. We had a team of 12 people altogether who worked on it, and we did check in with young service users as we were creating it, just to see what they thought, whether this for them kind of would be something that they felt they would have found helpful. And then you probably know this, so I'm going to skip over it really quickly, because hopefully you have already got your copy of the CatchOn resources. But just in case you haven't, just in case you're catching up with CatchOn, there are so many just kind of like CatchOn phrases that we've all, that catch up and catch 22 phrases that we've already kind of thought later products might have. So I apologize for all the catching puns that you're going to have throughout the whole presentation. But CatchOn is a free education resource aimed at year 7 and 8. There is a whole suite of options. So there are a lot of material there. You could use it for a single lesson, or you could use it for a series of lessons. Obviously, your lesson might be an hour, your lesson might be 35 minutes. So we wanted it to be incredibly flexible for you to be able to do that. But we wanted to look very specifically and explicitly at the topic of grooming and exploitation. There is a handbook for parents and professionals. And what we wanted, when these resources are delivered, we think it's really important that everybody in the school community, all the adults around those children, gets a copy of the handbook. It doesn't matter that they were sent a copy of it last year. It's just, in a way of making them aware that this lesson is happening. And if they get some slightly left field questions from children and they can't work out what's going on, they might think, hang on a second, they've just had that CatchOn lesson. I wonder if it's about that. There is comprehensive lesson plan guidance with everything that you would need. Every single resource is there, is photocopyable. And then there is a PowerPoint with embedded links to the videos that we've created. So everything is provided there for you. That's just a picture of the various things that we have. The Parents and Professionals pack is, if you already work in the field, it's absolutely nothing groundbreaking. It's exactly like the kind of things that I know a lot of local safeguarding children's partnerships have produced. It's just a sort of quick guide to have to hand, but we did want something that went alongside the lesson and could go to parents. That felt to be important as well, that because sometimes parents simply don't know. You know, you might mention county lines and really people have no idea what it is you're talking about. Will, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Sarah. Yeah, just to pick up on a little bit more about how we created the resource and some of the thinking that went kind of behind it. We identified a number of points of importance when creating the resource. So first of all, as with topics of such a nature, we knew that it was important that our approach was sensitive to potential trauma that service users may have previously experienced or witnessed, whilst actively seeking to prevent re-traumatization as well. So we looked for guidance from various specialists throughout our team, and that's been included throughout the resources. And we've kind of given advice, including how to create a safe and aware environment, ensuring a follow-up presence for any learners, and obviously, as Sarah said, that parental advice as well pack, creating more of a wraparound package for any of the young people that are accessing the learning. The content matter is purposely relatable to service users, as you'll see. However, we've advised throughout the content that it's to be delivered in a third person kind of setting, to kind of take that onus away from the personalization of the young person. The lesson is interactive to ensure learners were actively involved in the lesson. So we've got things like icebreakers, group work, worksheets, videos, a lot of different content to create that buy-in from the learners themselves. And we understood that the young people needed to understand these key points. So we made it as relatable as possible to them in situations where young people may find themselves in their day-to-day lives. We made sure that all of the resources were supported by various different resources. So things like glossaries were provided to ensure correct language was used, and providing in-depth analysis of kind of different types of child exploitation and advice on kind of how grooming might be displayed. So we've got kind of a whole picture. And whilst it's advised that when centres are planning to deliver the session, that copy of the parent pack, as Sarah stated, is made available for students, parents and guardians. That's helping create a kind of multifaceted approach to reducing child exploitation, raising awareness and giving that wraparound approach as well. We As well, there's signposting throughout the resources. So local and national advice and support numbers and websites are included throughout the pack. And we've also allowed space for centres to tailor their own local signposting as well, so that users have both a national approach and that kind of local approach as well. So know exactly what to do and who to reach out to if they needed to. We've also made a lot of the content kind of flexible and adaptable, because we understand that in every centre it's going to be delivered slightly differently depending on the user's needs, kind of what resources the centres have and things like that. So they're purposely adaptable so that centres can flex the learning to fit their cohort's needs. And already we've been told that the content has been flexed in different centres, and it's already been delivered to, I think, slightly younger age groups and potentially slightly older age groups as well. So there is that flex in there. It doesn't have to be just at year 7 and 8. We've also offered advice to how it can be flexed kind of a little bit lower and a little bit higher. And that's also where the following catch-ons or the following catching resources might be targeted at slightly older service users as well.
Thank you. And then we're just going to talk a little bit about the story. So Lindsay, who was involved in actually developing some of these stories based on the experience of some young people that she's worked with, is just going to talk us through the 3 storylines that we follow. And we've tried to make it quite wide ranging. We've tried to avoid kind of gender stereotyping. We've tried to avoid any kind of, I suppose, cliched messaging, and also tried to avoid replicating stuff that might already be available. So Lindsay, over to you.
Yeah, so like Sarah said, the scenarios are chosen really, really carefully, and we had a lot of practitioners who were involved in sort of developing these stories. So we had lots of input from around the country from young people's experiences, and we hope this gives like sort of a bit of a bigger picture of exploitation and the situations that young people can find quite relatable as well, and quite relevant. We were finding that sort of like a lot of the resources for online exploitation were focusing on apps like Facebook and things, which are really outdated now for young people. And we wanted to focus more on sort of current issues that our young people are facing. So the scenarios are quite wide ranging, with 3 scenarios. There's one around online child sexual exploitation, there's one around sort of face-to-face exploitation, and there's one around criminal exploitation. The first one in the series of resources is about a young person named Tanisha, who's a 13-year-old girl who's exposed to some online exploitation. Again, using more current technology. So we were thinking about sort of a lot of young people that come through to us that are exploited through apps sort of like Discord and things like that. And we didn't want to focus on the very typical sort of social media sort of exploitation that we see in some of the other resources that are out there. As with all of our resources, we really wanted to focus on explaining to young people that grooming is a process. So you'll see through each of these when you use them that sort of there is that sort of process of grooming that's highlighted within all of the scenarios. Tanisha's story particularly focuses on her vulnerabilities and the aspects that were sort of going on in her life that made her vulnerable to somebody targeting her for exploitation. These include sort of really common themes that we see around this age of young people. We had some parental separation, we've got low mood, low self-esteem, isolation, difficulty making friends in school, and it just sort of highlight those sort of increasing pressures that young people get when they're online to share nudes or to live stream sexual acts, and introduce sort of safety strategies to young people. So when this is happening, we know that a lot of the young people we work with will have being targeted online for exploitation, and we want them to be able to understand and know what to do in that situation, know who to report it to, know who to talk to, and know that they're not going to get in trouble for it. And we want to see that sort of when Tanisha sort of explores that with somebody and tells somebody what's happening, she gets the support that she needs. So she's not in trouble with her family or anything like that. She's just actually getting that support. We think that's really, really important in young people coming forward to just disclosing what's happening, because often they feel like they're going to get in a lot of trouble. We flick onto our next story, which is around Will. It was really important to us that we highlighted sexual exploitation of young males. It's something that is still massively underreported. I've worked within our services now for around 10 years, and it is still an area that is is really underreported. We don't get very many young males coming through to our services, and we wonder whether that's not being recognised. We know it's happening to young males, but because of many different factors, young males find it very, very difficult to disclose. So we felt that it was very important to have this representation in our stories and highlight to young males out there that, you know, this does happen, it's okay to talk about it. And the more we talk about it, the safer that space becomes for young people to report and have those conversations about what's actually happening and what their experiences are. So this is a sort of a very typical sports scenario. Will doesn't have any sort of obvious vulnerabilities, but it really highlights sort of the wants and needs of young people, that maybe all young people out there will have some level of things that they want or that they need, and how somebody that's in the wrong place at the wrong time can exploit that need. In Will's situation, it's wanting to progress into football, and the activities really focus on what's okay and what's not okay in relationships that young people have and how to deal with that. We've also got some good resources within this about highlighting places that young people attend in their local community, and often this promotes really good discussion about what's happening in your local area. So you'll probably find out a million and one things of what's actually going on in your local area that you never knew before, but highlighting that there are safe places for young people to go in communities, there's unsafe places, and unfortunately sometimes there's unsafe people in what places should be safe for young people. So that's what's really highlighted through Will's story. Our final one is Ashley, and it depicts a county line sort of criminal exploitation scenario focusing on young females. We wanted to flip this one a little bit and make sure we had a young female who was experiencing criminal exploitation, as most of the resources out there at the moment around criminal exploitation show young male experiences. And there is a real sort of limitation on what's available to highlight this for young females. In the previous two stories, exploitation doesn't actually occur, but that's not the same in Ashley's story. So Ashley is exploited through criminal exploitation. It shows her vulnerabilities, and it shows some of the indicators we see of criminal exploitation, such as going missing, and it really explores that process of grooming through the perpetrator again. It shows how sort of that perceived relationship that Ashley has with her perpetrator changes over time, and young people can sort of explore the negative effects that it has on Ashley, but maybe not on the perpetrator. The activities really focus on healthy relationships, how to recognise exploitative behaviours. Also got a good insight into sort of the police process and what might happen for a young person that does experience criminal exploitation, and sort of that sort of support that is out there for them. Again, it just brings up a lot of discussion about what's happening maybe locally, and all the scenarios are delivered in a very safe way. They're not there to traumatise young people. We don't want young people to sort of be exposed to this is the terrible things that could happen to you. We want to open up conversation with young people. And we think at this age, it's just really, really important that young people feel comfortable having those conversations and comfortable coming forward to people that they trust, which is you guys who are going to be delivering it.
Thank you very much. And so what we did do, obviously we felt it was really important to road test all of these materials before we went live with them, and we did make a number of tweaks as a result of that, but we were really pleased with the feedback that we had. As Lindsay said, we very deliberately didn't go hard-hitting, and that there is a temptation amongst adults, perhaps sometimes particular adults who work in particular fields, to want to do that, but actually firstly that's not supported with evidence, but we just felt that could be tremendously triggering or traumatizing for children who had experienced possibly some very negative things, but also for children who didn't. It could really make them fearful, and there's enough for young people to worry about. What we wanted to do here was to empower them. That was our main aim here in producing these things, but to empower you as practitioners, as teachers, as people involved with young people. We were really, just to draw attention to a couple of things here, we had a lot of feedback about how engaged children and young people were, and how actually, for a normal lesson, you know, sometimes it can be a little bit hard. An ex-teacher here, I know exactly what it can be like, but, you know, you're trying to, it might be last lesson of the day and you're trying to kind of generate that kind of energy, enthusiasm, which isn't always easy, because this is something that children aren't used to being able to bring into school, and yet is really part of their life. We got feedback that they really welcomed that. Very interestingly, one teacher told me that she delivered this to a year 7 class, but 2 year 8 girls had been sent out of their class and were sitting in the back of the class. Those girls participated enormously because they had a lot to contribute. And for once, some of those pupils who can sometimes be, you know, a little bit difficult, they've been sent out of class elsewhere, actually felt, hang on, this relates to me and I know a bit about this, I know what to suggest, and they actually played a very positive role in that lesson. Now, that was a completely unforeseen consequence, and it wasn't planned for by the teacher, but I just think it illustrates the fact that they were able to participate and eager to participate because this seemed relevant to them and they recognized that it did. We had teachers who say that they were actually quite shocked by what their children disclosed. They hadn't actually realized how much some of the children might know about it. They hadn't actually realized what was going on, especially when we're talking about those online harms. You know, children feel they might get in trouble or they're embarrassed. They don't feel they can necessarily share those things, even with their parents, and certainly not with their teachers. They may be sharing it with each other, but suddenly this lesson gave them permission to bring that into school, to bring that to class, to talk to the teacher about it. And the teacher said, you know, it made them go away and have conversations then in the staff room about, oh, well, I didn't realize this was happening. What do we need to do? Actually, there might be some work that we need to do to protect some of our children a little bit better, even from each other, because I don't want to give the impression that it's always kind of, you know, nasty adults out there grooming and exploiting children. Increasingly, what we're seeing is children exploiting other children because somehow they have picked up these behaviors and these attitudes from things that they have found on social media. I love this quote here: "You've got to take the attitude, it could happen here." And that's absolutely right. It doesn't matter what type of school you're in. And obviously, those of us on the call, we have now worked with people in a whole range of settings, you know, different socioeconomic groups, different types of education facility. It absolutely could happen anywhere. And I can tell you from my personal knowledge and experience that that is the case. So it's about creating an open forum, and back to what Will was saying about just enabling discussions. What we're trying to do is to say, do you know, it's okay to have these discussions here. This is safe. You're not going to, people aren't going to hit the roof. You can come and just, we can sort of surface these concerns. You can talk to us about it here. And actually, we also know some things that you can do. For example, it is possible to get a picture taken down that's shared online. But a lot of children and a lot of adults do not know that that's possible. You generate almost like a kind of digital fingerprint for an image, and anywhere it exists online in the entire globe, it can be taken down. So those are powerful things for children to know, and things that we wanted to make clear. And this teacher said that she felt comfortable and confident in the resources, so she could relax knowing where the lesson was going. We'd done that part for her. She had to focus on her real area of expertise, the children, because obviously we can provide the resources, but you're the ones who can provide that really deep knowledge and understanding of the children and their lives. And then we also spoke to children. It was much harder to get to speak to children, I'll be honest, and that's obviously because, you know, they're in class, and it's so difficult, isn't it, when you have all these competing claims on their time and things that you have to do. But we spoke to 10 year 7 pupils from different classes, and all of them felt they had a better understanding of child exploitation. All of them felt they were more aware and were likely to act differently in the future. 80% of them felt that it was a difficult subject to talk about. 2 of them obviously felt more confident, but the other 8 of them felt that it was a difficult subject to talk about, something that they might otherwise actually find it quite hard to discuss in school. And when we asked them a little bit more about what would really help them, they came straight back to these stories, actually looking at real stories, real cases, having examples like this, that would really help us. Also knowing we have a particular teacher to go to. They know you're all there for them, but sometimes when every teacher's there for you, you can kind of feel that no one is particularly there for you. So having a particular person that you knew you could go to, and you knew that by raising it, the school had given permission for you to do so, seemed to them to be really important. And again, the last person said, which I think was really interesting, you raising this kind of things with us, so we don't have to raise it. The fact that you have kind of acknowledged that there will be stuff like this happening was really helpful for us. So just before we move to you, from the kind of stuff that we've been trying to share, just to talk to you a little bit about our future plans. We are looking to gather more feedback. If you are an education provision or any kind of service that'd be interested in providing us with more feedback, that would be brilliant. We'd love you to get in contact with us about that. And we are looking to do more in-depth evaluation about it. Because if by doing this, we can keep a significantly greater number of children safer, by developing more of these products and making them widely available, it's a no-brainer. This is absolutely what we want to do, you know. So feedback and evaluation, we are looking to do more of that. We are looking to develop an update as well. So if you leave us with your email address, you may have done that when you downloaded the product, but if not, it's something that you can do in the chat at the end of this webinar. If you leave us with the email address, we promise not to spam you with all kinds of random rubbish, but what we will do is send you any updates that there might be, or any notification of any further developments that might be introduced. We are looking at producing a more SEND version of this for children with special educational needs. And again, obviously you would then be the first to know about that. And we're looking at other further products too. So already we have had other scenarios that people have raised with us and said, it'd be really great if you could cover this in your CatchOn resources. And then other services that Catch-22 provide in our risk and resilience teams. Our own colleagues have said we would love to have something like this that we can offer in our other services as well. So we are hoping that this will be something that is the beginning rather than the end of a piece of work. And any sort of ideas or input from you would be really welcome. So there are the there's my email address, and as I say, if you'd like to kind of pick up on any of those other things, I know I don't need to tell you about the webinar because you're on it, you know about that, but I just wanted to show you that slide because there is the email address, or the other option you have is to actually just pop something in the chat later on. Fabulous. I'm going to stop sharing, and we wondered whether you would like the opportunity to ask. It might be that you've tried it out already and you already have questions that you would like to ask us. It may be that you still have some doubts about trying it out. There's some things that you still don't understand that we haven't made clear. Great for us to know that, because obviously we can perhaps tweak because they're digital resources, we can tweak them. So if there's something that we haven't explained clearly and you'd like more information about, please feel free to ask that now, and it's something that might lead to us honing and improving the products as well. So I'm going to give an opportunity for people to put things in the chat, but whilst we are doing that, I'm going to ask my colleagues on the call a question that is the question I think we probably get most. And that is teachers saying, look, you know, we have a really packed curriculum. We have so much that we're expected to do. Why would we do this? Because actually we don't really have a problem with this in the school community. So I'm just going to ask that question and see if any of my colleagues would like to pick up on that.
I would just say from my experience, because I go out into schools and deliver a lot of group work, a lot of assemblies and things like that, where, you know, we're delivering to massive groups of young people, sometimes during a whole year group assembly. There will always be 2 or 3 young people that stay behind at the end of that assembly that need to have a chat with us. There might be someone who gets upset during that assembly. and the teachers had no idea this was happening. It will be happening. It's something that happens to all groups of young people from every walk of life, every area, every demographic of young people. It is happening, particularly in relation to online harms and what young people are experiencing online. It's happening every single day. So I think without us going in and doing these assemblies and things like that, all those young people that have stayed behind for a chat with us at the end, they may have never spoken to anyone. It's like what that young person said, you've raised this so we don't have to. If a young person's experienced exploitation, how do they find the words to tell somebody? We need to give them that opportunity and those words to use to say, this is me, this is what support I need.
Fabulous, thank you. I don't know, Gemma or Will, if you want to add.
I was just going to say, and actually the whole point of this resource is it's about that prevention. So we know all that education, if we can get it in as soon as possible, we may prevent that from happening to somebody. So I know there are schools within our local area, sometimes they're a bit worried if they zone in on one particular subject like child exploitation. What would that mean in terms of reputation if word got out that they had these specialist services in? Whereas actually, like I say, the whole point is because of the young cohort as well, specifically, it is about that prevention. So if we can prevent it from happening or escalating to any young people, that's the aim of it ultimately.
Yeah, fabulous, brilliant.
I'll add something to that as well. I totally agree with what Gemma and Lindsay said, and it's just about starting that conversation early as well and making it an okay topic to talk about. It's not a taboo topic. We need to be having those conversations with this age group so that they do raise their voices and their voices are heard. As Lindsay said, that it is going on. Those people do need to have their voices heard. So having that conversation nice and early and making it a safe space that people can raise their concerns is really, really important, I think.
Fabulous, thank you. We've got a couple of questions coming in. Gemma, can I ask you, is it completely free or are there any sneaky costs anywhere?
Yeah, no, it's completely free. That's the way we've designed it. So every aspect of it is, and then actually as well, the added value, I suppose, is our service contact details are on there. So even if there isn't a Catch-22 service available in that area, we would always be there to support and guide. And one thing we're really advocating is actually there's so many amazing speakers that go into schools and talk about exploitation, whether that's through lived experience, whether that's through specialisms in certain areas. But what we would always say is sometimes it is literally like going in, dropping a bomb and then walking away. So it's vital that the local services and pathways and signposting agencies are available to children and you guys as well. So you know exactly who to refer to, exactly who to raise concerns with. So all of that stuff is involved, included in the package as well. But yes, it is free. Sarah, back to your question. I went off a bit then.
No, that's great. Thank you. We've also been asked, is it available only teachers or is it available for anyone to download? Lindsay, can I pass that to you?
It's available for anybody to download and use in their setting. Obviously it's designed within the curriculum and it's got all the curriculum guidance and everything with it, but that doesn't mean whether, if you're from a care placement or special school or, I don't know, youth service, something like that, I think it'd be really transferable to all of those settings. Anywhere where you're working with a group of young people, it's usable. And it's just nice. It's got all those like lesson plans and things like that you don't really have to think about too much. You can download everything, you can print off the worksheets and it's all good to go. So I think it can be transferred across all settings. I'm using it already in my direct one-to-one work with young people. And yeah, it's going down really, really well. I've just tweaked it and we're just using it on an individual basis.
Fabulous, thank you. Sorry, I've turned my camera off, but I seem to be having a bit of an internet wobble, so I am still here. Anyone else want to comment on that one? Now, we've had a question about, and I think it's something that, Will, you've alluded to, but I wonder if you'd pick this up a little bit more. Obviously, we created it for year 7 to 8. We had a look at the year 7 to 8 curriculum, the bottom end of Key Stage 3. We tested it with those year groups. We spoke to those teachers. So we can guarantee that it's pitched correctly. and at an appropriate sort of, I suppose, amount of detail for those year groups. Would it be okay, or are there any kind of things you'd need to be careful about if you were to be using it outside of that age range?
So yeah, definitely. I mean, the things that you've picked up on then is the fact that it has been piloted and targeted at years 7 and 8, and obviously the feedback we've received is from that age group. So if you do want to adapt it, then we probably recommend that teachers liaise with their DSLs, with their designated safeguarding leads, and checking that any content that they want to flex, or if they want to change it to slightly different age groups, that this is appropriate for those age groups. Definitely, we're not advising it that it's used below year 6, but kind of year 6 and year 9 potentially, but definitely having those conversations with your designated safeguarding lead to check that the content is appropriate for those age groups is good. And checking that, especially if you're using it for an older age group, is it pitched at their level? Is the content still aimed at them? Are they going to be understanding, or do we need to go one step further and have slightly further and deeper discussions and conversations with those? And essentially, that's some resources that we could look at creating in the future, something like the CatchOn resource, but for maybe year 9 and 10 or something like that.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's that thing about prevention, isn't it? I mean, if we're doing it year 9 or 10, we need to acknowledge that actually they may be, in terms of their own experience, they may be at a slightly different stage, mightn't they? And I absolutely agree. We've said, haven't we, that we provide the resources, so it certainly could be used with year 6 and it could be used with year 9, but that's for you to determine as professionals, because you're the ones who know your children. In the end, it's about really knowing and understanding your children, understanding their sensitivities, their potential experiences, their vulnerabilities. And so that's the piece of work we can't do for you, but you hopefully can take our piece of work and make it fit the cohort that you have in front of you with their particular sort of needs and preferences and so on. On that subject, we've also been asked, we talked about it being flexible. Will, I think you talked about this. So could teachers kind of like chop things out, add things in? Is that all okay to do that?
Most definitely, as you just said, that we can create the resources, but the person standing in front of the learners knows those learners best. And so if they need to adapt it, if they think there's something in there that's not relevant, or if they need to spend a little bit more time and go into a bit more depth on the subject, then absolutely, it's up for the facilitators to make that decision. You know your learners better than us. We create the resources to help you as best as possible. And then, yes, it can definitely be flexed 100%. And we'd like to hear feedback as well. So if something isn't quite working, you've run it a few times and it's not working, let us know. We could possibly flex it or change it in our delivery. And likewise, if you've added something in that works really well, let us know as well. It'd be fantastic. Any feedback like that is really valuable for us, and we could look at adapting what we're offering as well. So yes, definitely is flexible. Same as the age groups. You know your learners better than us, for sure.
I guess one thing I would say around the cutting out, please do feel free to cut things out. We know we've got too much in there. And the reason we put in loads of different options for the lessons is that there were some that would feel more appropriate than others, some that work better with larger groups, some with smaller groups, and so on. And so you will not be able to deliver all of it. And in fact, that was the message we got from teachers. They're just like, oh my goodness, you didn't think we'd get all this done, did you? No, we absolutely didn't. It's about having a suite of options. If you're adding things in, please make sure that you are, again, as Will says, checking that out with your designated safeguarding lead, maybe your pastoral team, who will know a little bit more about what's going on for those children, because you might potentially hit a nerve, a sensitive point, and that could be very distressing for a child. I think the one thing I would say about adding things in is that it is Catch-22 branded. And if you're adding in lots of slides of things that actually aren't from us, then we've tried to just kind of give it to people, but the difficulty there is that we're also giving the control. So the one thing we would like is if you do add slides in, if you make it clear that it's not a Catch-22 slide, this is something that you have added, so that there's kind of the integrity of the materials that we provided, but then the additional things that you may have found. And there is some great stuff out there. We're certainly not the only people. What we wanted to do was simply facilitate the early raising of these issues, creating a safe space in which conversations can happen that might actually keep children safe in the future. Been asked a question here, and I'm so sorry. I think I might have to disappoint whoever's asked it. Can Catch-22 come in and deliver the sessions? That's one of the issues. So we have services up and down the country. All of those services, I would say, I don't think there's one service. I look at my colleagues on the call, and I really think they'll agree. I don't think there's one service that isn't already very stretched, because this is a real expanding area of need. And we all know too that the resources available for us seem to be ever slimmer, or certainly go less far than they did. In areas where Catch-22 are delivered, are commissioned to deliver exploitation support, there may be an element of that contract that includes going into schools. So it's always worth asking us. It may be that, for example, if you're in Merseyside, Lindsay does genuinely go in and deliver the sessions, and it may be that you can have the lovely Lindsay going in and doing her brilliant. I've seen her do her brilliant work. That would be great. It may well be that if you're in an area where Catch-22 are not currently commissioned, that isn't something that we can do.
One thing that we do in Merseyside as well is if we've got teachers that are maybe a little unsure of how to deliver these kind of sessions with young people, even before we had CatchOn, we'll go in and sort of co-deliver with them. They'll stay with us, and then they can go on then and deliver to other year groups, other classes and things like that. And just so they've got that sort of starting point with us, and they know we're sort of in the background. Then if issues are raised, we can then go in. So if you are in Merseyside, do get in contact with us. And we'll see what's available in your particular area of Merseyside.
Brilliant, thank you. Are there any more questions that people would like to ask us? Now is not your only opportunity. If you want to email something, you suddenly, it all seems to make sense to you now in this moment. We've all been there where you think, yeah, I get this. And then you go away, you look at the resources, you come to actually do your detailed plan for year 7, perhaps in June, and suddenly you think, I'm not entirely sure about this. Please feel free to contact us. We have left our contact details there. And as I think we have intimated, we really would welcome some kind of further information or feedbacks or whatever. In the chat right now is the CatchOn inbox. There is a specific inbox for any inquiries, comments or feedback about this. So that's CatchOn, all one word, at catch-22.org.uk, and that inbox is ongoing. It's not just for the purposes of the launch of the product. Can I ask my colleagues whether there's any final comment that you'd like to add at all? Anything that we have omitted to say that it would be important to add in?
I suppose just thank you from all of us, really. We know exploitation is one of the most difficult sessions, especially if you don't feel confident as a professional to deliver. But we know you've got to deliver it anyway as part of the curriculum in some aspect. So I suppose the main sort of reason for us to develop this was to support you guys more than anything, so that you feel, even if it's a little bit more confident than you did previously, to be able to deliver this to young people. So yeah, thank you very much for all of your support with it.
Yeah, I think that's a great note to end on. Can I also just add a massive thank you, as somebody who was kind of involved in pulling the project together, to all of my wonderful Catch-22 colleagues, because the support that we've had on this from all of the various teams, and actually from our young people, of whom we are so proud. I would just like to publicly thank all my colleagues, and thank all the young people who've had any input to it. And thank you for being willing to give the time to listen here. And we really hope this is something that you will consider, not just trying out, but consider actually building in as a way of protecting your children from harms that can happen outside of the home, and that we know are increasingly happening to children and young people. Thank you very much for attending, and all the very best for the rest of the week.
Thank you, everyone.